Record. Hey everyone, super excited to see you guys. We're really happy that you joined us for this last session of ours. Super excited to get into it. This is just about um, kind of the mechanics of brief writing, the citations of brief writing. Now that you've already gone through the elementary steps, you're veterans at this activity now. This is just about making sure we can get you to that one last step that will really put your briefs up above the top and really above the competition. With that being said, here is the beginning of Citations Are Packed, our third and final workshop of the season. Ignore the date. So
All
today's
right.
schedule. Oh,
Sorry. So we should probably introduce ourselves also. I'm Lizzie. I'm a sophomore at Yale. I'm currently the brief writing captain there. And I'm also do logistics for NAMC. And you guys know Steven.
and hello, my name is Steven. I am a junior at Yale. I'm currently the VP of the moot court team, and I am the chair of the brief writing contest for NAMC. So I'm the one helping organize this competition for you guys. With that being said, I think we can get into it. So, for a quick overview of today's schedule, we're going to start off with a rubric overview. Then we're going to get into the organization of a brief, then some citations, and then the Q&A.
We'll start out with a quick reminder about the rubric. It should be pretty straightforward, similar to what we talked about in the first workshop, but I just want to make sure we have a little bit more depth this time. So we're judging based on five categories. What we really want to emphasize here is that your legal argument and analysis and your mastery of the case material is going to be the vast majority of your brief. It's going to be over half. And that's just going to make sure that that's what you're emphasizing above everything else. But today we're also going to talk about mechanics, citation, and organization because those are still important categories. We can't tell you how to make your argument, except that you should be creative and go beyond the case problem. But citations are something that we can train. Obviously, our citation guide is a lot simpler than the official Blue Book, but I think it's still really important to kind of go over this. So the presentation we're using today is something I borrowed from the Yale brief writing presentation that we use for all of our students there. So it's going to be a little bit more thorough than what you need for NAMC, but I think it's also important to go over everything today.
Just to quickly run through, as we mentioned before, the two biggest parts are going to be legal analysis and argumentation and case mastery. Both of those, respectively, will make up one-third of your score, right? You're graded out of 150 points, and legal analysis is 50 of them. This part just makes sure that your brief is focusing on only one of two issues, that you choose and unambiguously defend either the petitioner or respondent's side, that you're using all of these great case law, and all of these great tests, that you're employing the test correctly, that you're being creative and using your logic, that you're being persuasive, and that you're kind of anticipating and responding to potential counter arguments. And you don't want to like do a straw man where you're making the other side sound ridiculous, but really kind of just making sure that your brief, if you could only write one thing, and that is the only person a judge will see, that they will look at that and see, well, yeah, no, you're obviously right, no matter what else I hear. Additionally, mastery of case material and fact pattern. This is about actually using all of the cases and the record you have to that. Legal analysis about kind of the argument you make. Case material is what evidence are you using to make that argument? Are you drawing from that evidence correctly? Is it convincing? Remember, we're a closed universe. You can't go outside of the table of authorities when you're looking for cases. Can compare between past decisions and the current case problem. And you should really be proving that you know the difference between what's a majority opinion, what's a concurring opinion, what's a dissenting opinion. Is this opinion binding or persuasive? Is it a lower court opinion or a higher court opinion? So just making sure you know all of the cases you'll come across and how they can fit into your argument. Um, this is pretty straightforward mechanics, just making sure that your writing is legible, you don't have very many grammatical errors, that you're writing using Times New Roman 12-point font, double spaced. And this final section on brief organization is just about the formatting of it. And this is another 10 points. An argument should be outlined beforehand. You should have each point logically flow from one point to the next. You should kind of have a bit of a thesis statement, much like an opening paragraph would, to outline your overarching argument. This is just going to be your roadmap, making sure that you really walk us through your argument. There are four parts of a brief: a title page, question presented with review, argument, and conclusion. This is what a title page will be look like. It's so simple. All you have to do, go here, at that red highlighted portion and put either petitioner or respondent there. You wouldn't obviously use red. You would use just black, bold, underlined. Question presented for review. Once again, you're just copying and pasting this directly from the case. The one real thing you can get be creative here. This is your actual argument. You'll obviously write a lot more here. We don't want to build your arguments for you, but just to use last year's example, if you remember that, you can use these different subheadings to really kind of walk us through it and provide a clear structure for what you're writing. So you might want to choose a brief roadmap here where you kind of introduce the subject you'll be talking about. You might want to have the answer to the question presented for review at this first heading. The state of New York's police impersonation statute 424 violates the free speech clause of the First Amendment. And if your two prongs, the two main arguments you'd spend talking about an oral argument would be that that speech was classified as protected parody, if you remember from last year, and that the statute 424 is a content-based restriction. You might have those as subheadings that can really break down your argument and make it very easy for us to follow us along. You also can include sub-subheadings, but you don't have to do so, and we recommend that you avoid going past sub-subheadings. That being said, they are useful too. The important part is just to make sure your argument is clear, it's logically organized, it flows, and that any judge can see that and understand exactly what points you're working through. And then conclusion, once again, easy part. Judgment of the lower court, the state court, whatever court that's we're kind of considering should be either reversed or affirmed. With that being said, I'll hand it over to Lizzie to discuss citations. This is where it gets
Yes.
complicated.
So again, we want to emphasize that citations are only 20 points from the rubric, and I know it can be a little bit complicated as I'm going through this. So if you have any questions, do feel free to email us or to check out the citation guide, which will give you a more thorough analysis. But if you just want to hear things, I tend to learn audio by audio. This should help you out a little bit. So on the next slide, we have the two different places where you can put citations. So you can either put citations within as their own separate sentence at the end of a sentence. That's when they're supporting the entire statement, or you can use them as a parenthetical. This can both be set off by parentheses, or occasionally you'll see it set off by commas, but that's pretty rare and I wouldn't recommend it. So for this example, you can see that the entire statement is about Hustler magazine versus Falwell. It's saying in 1988, this is what the court did. And so that's when we're going to have the full sentence citation after it. That'll typically also be used for most cases if you're quoting a large portion of full sentence, something like that. For citation parenthetical, you're only going to use that when it's very clear, especially if you have multiple citations in a sentence, for example, or if you just want to apply it to that one portion before. So for example, this one is just saying the parody protection does not apply to cases of actual malice, and that actual malice quote is from Hustler. Or it's saying C Hustler. It probably shouldn't say C there, but that's a separate issue. And then the second part is about this case, specifically the application. So we don't want to be citing that as we would if we had a full sentence after that. So we have the smaller little parenthetical citation just in the middle there. So you should be using both of these in your brief, depending on what's appropriate. On the next slide, we will go over the different types of citations. So this is the Blue Book. This is the big, fat, uniform system of citation that law students or law journals or professors or real lawyers will use. We're using a very simplified version of that today, but it'll still give you the basic types of citation. So the first type of citation is going to be a long form citation. So this is going to be the first time the case appears. You're going to have everything, and I'll go over what everything is in a little bit. And then the second time a citation appears and subsequent times, you only need the short term of the case. So you saw with Hustler magazine versus Falwell, you can just use Hustler, and you'll have the same reporter site, which we'll go over in a second, and then the pin site, which is the specific page number it starts on if you're citing a specific page. In the short form version of the citation, the short name is going to be usually the first party, but if the first party is something like the United States, and everything is, then it's going to be the most unique or most recognizable. Next is going to be the Constitution. Of course, you can also cite that. It's a little bit more rare in this case, but you would have done it a lot, for example, last year when we had the First Amendment being implicated a lot. We can also cite the chain cites, which is a case within a case citation. Again, remember, we can only cite cases outside of the record to the extent that they're cited within cases in the record. So those aren't going to be huge, giant citations, but you'll hear those called chain cites or case within a case citations. Next is going to be the record itself. Again, we should never hesitate to cite that for our facts. And then finally, id. Id is just the same thing that you just cited. So it stands for ibid, and it's just the exact same thing you cited in the previous citation, just so you don't have to write everything out again. But that only applies if it was the direct previous citation. So we'll go into all of these in the next slides. We talked about, there's also important parentheticals, and we're using italics, we're using signals, which we'll talk about in a moment. So the first type of citation, as we explained, is a long-form citation. So first you're going to have the name of the case. In this case, it's Miranda versus Arizona. Then you're going to have where it's found, which is the reporter volume, the reporter, and the page number. So for example, in this one, it's 384 US. So it's volume 384 of the United States reports, because this is a Supreme Court case. And then the page and it's where it began, which is 436. And then finally, you have the year of the decision. So this is all what's going the first time that you do. You'll also sometimes, if it's a lower court case, have a parenthetical saying what court it is. So for example, the First Circuit. And then sometimes you have an explanatory parenthetical, or you have a weight parenthetical, which says, Breyer J dissenting. And then you'll have occasionally an explanatory parenthetical saying what the case is doing. That's going to be more typical in academic articles than it would be here. I believe there's another example if we go to the next, click next. So yeah, this is a longer form citation from a lower court case. So you can see it says not just 1966, as the Supreme Court citation did for Miranda versus Arizona, but that it was on the Fourth Circuit. And again, all of these citations are going to be in at the bottom of the case problem. You'll notice this second citation also has a pin cite. So after the citation where we have the volume, the series, and the page number it begins on, we have the specific page that we're citing here. So if you're citing the case generally, like something like the holding, something like that, you don't need a pin cite. But if you're citing a quote or something that appears on a specific page, you're going to want to cite that page, and it's going to go just there, right after the beginning page number, or right after the series number, if it's a short form citation, which we'll explain on the next slide. Oh, okay. This next slide is actually parenthetical. There's two different types of parentheticals that you can use. First is the weight parenthetical. So that's if you're using something that's non-binding, something like that's not a majority opinion, you'll want to have a weight parenthetical explaining that. And then you'll have an explanatory parenthetical, which can explain something about the case. So I showed you this Steve versus King as our example case. There's a parenthetical there for the year, which you're going to have in any long form citation. But then below, this is a giant citation for Bush versus Gore. This is, you have the regular citation, the pin cite to page 144, the year, 5-4 decision, which you'll very rarely see, and then Breyer J dissenting, and then a quote from the case, which is an explanatory parenthetical. So again, most of the time, the only parentheticals you're going to be using in your briefs are weight parentheticals, and of course the year. So if you're citing from a dissenting or concurring opinion, you should make sure, or a plurality opinion, you should make sure you're making that clear. Next slide. Oh yeah, sorry, if you go back once, I forgot that was there. So I added explanatory parentheticals to this. So we start with Steves versus King 2024. Then we have a plurality opinion, which is our weight parenthetical. And then our explanatory parenthetical is holding that brief writing is more fun than oral argument, which is the holding in the case, hypothetical case. Sorry, next slide. Okay. Make sure you're citing the right version of the case. This isn't as relevant to us, but we just want to make sure that that can sometimes happen. That was an issue for the Yale brief writing, just because of the way our case problem was set up, but that shouldn't be an issue here. So we can just go to the next slide. Okay, short form citations. This is the shortest well, this is when, again, your subsequent citation that you're going to do after you cite it for the first time. So you're going to use the shortened name of the case. So for Miranda versus Arizona, that's Miranda, because there's a lot of cases involving Arizona. So again, we're going to use the first party name or the most recognizable. So if it's something with the United States, you shouldn't be using that. Then you're going to have just the reporter cite. So instead of 384 US 436, which is the first number page, you're just going to have 384 US. And then if you have a pin site, it's going to be 384 US at 455, which is this is a big page we're citing. So instead of having the comma that you do for long form citation, you'll have at. Next slide. Okay, and sometimes we can also do case within a case citations. Remember, we're only using cases that are cases within a case as they're cited in the parent case. That doesn't make any sense, but you know what I mean. We can't be going outside of our closed system, our closed case problem. So in this example, we're citing Murphy, but only to the extent that Murphy itself is cited in Doe. And so then you're going to have that nice as cited in, and then the citation for the case you're citing. So in this case, Doe has already been cited previously in its long form. So we're using the short form citation for Doe. Next slide. And then our favorite id. We love id because it saves space. So we're only going to do that when it's the exact same source as the previous citation. So for example, if I'm citing the record and I'm citing the record at page 3, I'd say record at 3. And then for my next citation, if I'm also citing the record at 3, I can just put id. If I'm citing the record at page 4, I can say id at 4. It can add ambiguity, so make sure you're only using it when it's the exact same citation as the previous citation. So if there's anything in between, you can't be using it again. Next slide. All right, citation signals. So I want to make clear before we go through the slide that there are a lot of signals listed on the slide. The only ones we're going to be using, or you should be using for your briefs, are C and C also. So C supports the preceding statement, and C also is used. I mean, you honestly shouldn't even be needing to use that. That's usually used for like a long list of additional cases. So I could say C the record at 4, C also 5 other cases. We also, in academic writing, you'll sometimes see some of these other ones, but we don't need to worry about that for now. Next slide. Okay, other citations, you're going to cite to the record, which is how, and then these are just examples of how you do that. Again, all of this is in your citation guide. So the record at whatever page, and then the Constitution, you're going to cite the article, the section, clause, or the amendment. And you can also cite the section of the amendment as well if you need to. Next slide. All right, here's some examples. All of these citations have something wrong with them. So we're going to see if we can guess what they are. So first one, excuse me. So we have the parent citation above. So the first one, it's US versus Nixon. And of course, the issue there is, there's 2 issues there. If we go to the next, it'll reveal. So there's actually 2 issues with this. Only one of them is highlighted. First of all, United States should never be abbreviated. It should always be the full United States. And then we don't need, if it's a Supreme Court case, you don't need the court parenthetical. You just need the year there. So we don't need to have US 1974. Okay. And this next one is a long form with pin site. Let's see if you can think of what the issue is there. I'll give you a second. All right, and let's reveal. So the issue is we only use at 691 when it's a short form citation. So for example, in the one below, there's another issue with it, but it's using the pin site correctly. So normally you'll have the comma for a long form citation before the year, as we see there. And then this is a short form with pin site, and there's an issue with this one as well. If we reveal, it's that we never use United States as a short term for the citation. There's way too many cases with the United States in it, so it would be Nixon. There's also multiple cases with Nixon. That's okay. But this is, of course, the most famous one, so people will know what you mean. Next slide. All right, and then I have some just general tips and tricks for brief writing as you're beginning to finish up those briefs. First of all, don't start writing your brief at the last second. It takes a lot longer than you think it does. Trust me, I know. We have a lot of brief writers at Yale that try to write their briefs the night before. Sometimes they submit them late. I always tell them to do it over Thanksgiving, but I'm not sure if you guys have a break coming up. But that's really important to give yourself enough time to go through those citations and make sure everything's formatted correctly. And try to make your argument as clear as possible. Stephen already talked about the importance of having those clear signals on your clear outline, but we want to make sure that we have space for that. And remember that your briefs are shorter than you think. So please make sure you're taking advantage of all of that space. And also that you're not putting in too much extraneous detail. There's a fine line. Try to use the cases if you can, but don't kill yourself the same way you would in an oral argument. We want to make sure you're showing an understanding of the case problem. That doesn't mean you need to stretch to include every case. And then we want to make sure we're making a distinctive argument. This was an issue last year, and we just want to make sure we're emphasizing that to everyone. You have to go beyond the case problem and beyond what we argue. I know in oral argument, you had the benefit of the judges to kind of move you around and test your argument. But in brief writing, we want to make sure our arguments are really clear and concise. Yeah, and now it's Stephen's turn again.
Yeah, I want to just emphasize you aren't going to get all of the points if you make sure you include every case or make every argument. It's about the quality of how you use your quizzes, the quality of your argument. So you want to make sure you're going novel, you're going deep with this issue, and you're really finding the angle you want to tackle it at. But it's the quality that's really important, and we really hope that see your great legal minds at work and get excited to see what you guys do. Speaking of what you can do, though, remember that Friday, April 4th, is still a bit more than a month away, but that's going to be the registration and submission deadline. You do not have to register into the competition until you have to submit your brief. So if you want to register 5 minutes before the deadline and then immediately turn in your brief, you are more than welcome to do that. You could
Please
also
don't
get
though.
it done earlier, though, and make sure you don't worry about getting cut off by the timeline. We'll announce the results on the second day of nationals. We'll kind of do that along with the final speaker. It should be a great time. And other than that, we're super excited. With that being said, are there any questions?
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming to be here. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach us either through NAMC's email or through my email at stephen.king.sck38@yale.edu. We're super excited. This is the last workshop, so you won't be seeing any more of these popping up, but you'll still probably see us hanging around at different tournaments. You'll see our names around. Many of you folks coming up to Yale, we're looking forward to see you there. And we're super excited to see all of your amazing briefs, which I think will be due like the week before Yale or something like that. With that being said, thank you for being here with us. And we hope you guys have a wonderful weekend or a wonderful rest of your week.
Take care.